You've no idea the power I represent. It knows your story.
The much-awaited Mission Impossible 7 has finally hit the cinemas, and Tom Cruise is back in action trying to protect the world against the greatest threat in the franchise so far. The entertaining, action-packed saga takes off from the word go, and Ethan Hunt and his team must fight against all odds to do the impossible. Luckily for them, the team has some good practice in doing so. In this video, we will explore the primary villain, which isn't a human but a powerful AI tool gone rogue, and there'll be a few spoilers along the way. Just before we go into our explanation, we have a small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. It's just a small click for you, but for us it means a lot. Thank you. Now let's begin. Why is the malicious AI element so relevant to the plot? The highlight of the Mission Impossible franchise has always been the gritty and ruthless villains who come up against Ethan Hunt and his team. The IMF crew has taken down rogue agents, notorious terrorists, and even moles within their own organization, but Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1 has brought us a very different enemy for them to tackle. Ethan Hunt has surely never come up against anything like this before, because the enemy this time is an AI entity that seems to have gone rogue and now plans for some sinister world domination. This AI tool, called the Entity, is a digital demon of sorts, and it's not just incredibly intelligent, but also cunning and sadistic in some of its moves. At the end of the movie, Ethan Hunt seems to have outsmarted the Entity for the time being, but the threat is far from over, and we have to wait for the second installment next year to find the answers. How did the Entity come into existence? The narrative has kept the true origins of the Entity a mystery. We get to see the Entity plugged into a computer system on a Russian submarine, and it manages to destroy the submarine in order to escape. Initially, you might be led into thinking that the Russians came up with the technology before it went rogue and out of control, and even the US intelligence community seemed to think that way. However, it's finally revealed that the Entity was made in the US, and we get to know this only in the climactic moments of the movie. It was developed as a tool for the US government, and it only ended up on the Russian submarine to serve as a test run for the technology. Fortunately, nobody could foresee that the Entity would go on to develop a mind of its own and set up its own goals. After destroying the submarine, it went missing into the digital void, and now forces from all over the world are trying to get their hands on this unique technology. In the words of director Denlinger, played by Cary Elwes, he wants to use the Entity to unsettle the global balance of power and overthrow the US government. Eventually, it would end up creating a fascist superstate without any form of opposition. But what was the actual purpose behind the creation of the Entity? Well, that's never been specified in clear words. Besides, it wouldn't be too wrong to assume that the whole project behind the development of Entity was a top secret, known only to a select few like Denlinger. It's therefore also completely left in the dark how the Entity ever ended up in the Russian submarine in the first place. There are keys that apparently have the ability to control the Entity, but we also don't know where these keys came from. One of the biggest mysteries surrounding the Entity is the shadow of doubt of actual intention. Surely it seems like the AI tool is keen on world domination of some form or other, but what it aims to achieve eventually, well, that will probably be revealed in the next chapter of the movie. It seems to have taken a special liking to Gabriel, however, a character in the film, and even the reasons behind that are debatable. It could well be because of his personal connection to Ethan Hunt. Is it possible that the powerful and sinister AI tool actually has a plan that's far more complex in nature? Well, it's surely a possibility, but we speculate at this point. What is the Entity like, and how does it function in the movie? Our discussion so far might have led you to imagine some kind of physical form for the Entity, but nothing as such has been attributed to the AI tool. The movie does make it clear that the Entity is not just one AI, but it happens to be a network of AI. It was originally created to be a lot simpler than what it turned out to be, but somehow the Entity managed to evolve and be capable enough to plan taking over the world and jeopardizing governments around the globe. You can imagine the Entity to be like multiple personality and thinking abilities functioning as one entire unit, a hive mind will. It hardly ever speaks, apart from the voice of someone else to fulfill its cause required. There's an eerie, garbled, gurgling sound that comes from the Entity, and in tone and mysterious origins of the AI machinery will remind you of a Lovecraftian horror character. As Benji Dunn explains, it is a self-aware, self-learning, truth-eating digital parasite which is bound to an ethereal real existence. The lack of any physical form is hardly a deterrent entity. It actually makes things even more difficult to track it down. The powers possessed by the entity are truly intimidating, and the sheer amount of information control is what makes its database so potent. The narrative continuously explores how futile an attempt to subdue the entity are, and how supreme information technology is. It can manipulate any kind of digital data, impersonate voices over calls to create confusion and chaos, delete certain camera footage when required, and so much more. Moreover, the entity is capable of infiltrating the most secure and advanced databases across the earth, which make every digital information available for the malicious AI. With this abundance of information, the entity can make educated predictions and calculate its next step, and Ethan Hunt has a hell of a lot on his plate, having to deal with a force of such proportions. The movie begins with a scene aboard the Russian submarine Sevastopol, where we first see the entity. The AI tricks the submarine into sinking to the bottom of the Arctic Ocean, and we're later told that this particular submarine had managed to develop state-of-the-art stealth technology, which was a cause for concern for the US intelligence. Maybe the creation of the entity was simply intended to sabotage the stealth capabilities of the submarine. However, with the growing sentience of this machine, it began to rewrite its own objective. It gained access to some of the top secret digital files across the world and obtained information about every stock market central bank. Soon it became clear that the entity did absolutely nothing with this information and simply infiltrated the high security digital files to prove it could do so. It was a smart message to governments across the world that the entity could bring them to a standstill at a moment's notice. This sparked off the great race among world governments and their covert teams to attempt to control the entity before all was lost. Is the entity really a sentient demonic machine? How powerful is it? The subject of AI and its predominance in contemporary society is evident for everyone. Naturally, several movies have picked up on the idea and used it to imagine various situations where the AI models have gone rogue. The entity follows a similar route, but in a very different way, because it has largely been portrayed as an evil godlike force. With the unlimited digital resources and a sadistic sense of humor, the entity is not just a malfunctioning machine, but one with a sentient mind capable of planning with emotions. Aside from the sentience and an amazingly intelligent network system, we have already discussed the ability of the entity to access any type of digital information. When Ethan and his team joined the hunt, it became very for them to remain one step ahead, because the entity had access to any communications between them, and it knew any secret code that they were sending each other. It could also mimic the voices of Ethan's allies' plans, and it can be said with certainty that there hasn't been a more formidable villain in the Mission Impossible franchise. One of the most potent powers of the entity is its ability to predict events before they happen. This precognition and fortune telling comes from the abundance of data and miraculous calculations that are possible to predict all outcomes, including the most likely one. The entity could successfully predict the nature and fate of certain people, and it also predicted the journey of the key right up until the Orient Express. Why is the entity after Ethan Hunt, and how will his death benefit the sinister AI tool? While we might still be speculating the potential goals of the entity, one thing has been made abundantly clear in this film. The entity needs Ethan Hunt to die long-term goals, and that explains why it's after his life. It's wary of ET's capabilities, which the data in its system must have confirmed, and there's a different approach than that of any other government agent across the world. While most people are trying to harness the insane power of the entity for their own advantage, Ethan is one of the rare ones who truly realize dangers associated with this power. He knows that it cannot really be controlled by any one person, and he goes rogue along with his team in order to destroy the entity entirely. Of course, the all-knowing entity is well aware of his plan, and it wants him out of the way in order to succeed. Whatever the ultimate outcome, there's no doubt that the next Mission Impossible movie will set up the most engaging and explosive climax that we've ever witnessed. And surely the entity will not go down without a fight. What happens to the entity in the next movie? Dead Reckoning Part 1 ends with some clear ideas for us regarding the potential turn of events. Now, Ethan Hunt is aware of the entity being on the Sevastopol, and he also possesses the key to access it and destroy the AI menace for good. However, he still doesn't know about its exact location, and the entity is surely going to stage many more obstacles along his way before he can reach it. Grace being accepted into the Mission Impossible force might end end up being a great advantage for Ethan. Count on her in his next adventures. Overall, it's a mouth-watering prospect that awaits us, and the only bad part is that we have to wait for a year to know the answers. Marvelous verdict. The AI nemesis enhanced the brilliance of this movie. This movie takes smart steps in being a cautionary tale surrounding the dangers of excessive AI use. But worry not, because it never becomes too preachy. The AI antagonist certainly adds a fresh touch to the series, and it's exciting to see Tom Cruise's iconic character upgrade himself, take on threats of adequate proportions. The entity is truly intimidating, and associating so much power without putting a face to it is a great way to strike fear into the hearts of the audience. If you've seen the movie, let us know in the comments your thoughts about this powerful AI tool, and also give us your reviews of the film. What did you think of it? If you haven't seen it already, we strongly recommend you head to the theaters for an unforgettable experience.